there's been a huge blast, okay, an explosion and wreckage at a dam in Ukraine. It's the Kakhovka Dam. Now, this is very important because it's another one of those cases like the Crimea Bridge, like the Nord Stream pipelines, where you have sabotage or an attack on very, very substantial industrial and civilian infrastructure, right? And it's causing a lot of flooding, and the media are already, they're jumping into, oh my God, it was Russia. Russia blew up the dam. And I'm going to go through this with you and debunk this drivel, this absolute nonsense that you hear from the media. And I'm going to talk about Nord Stream and the media's coverage of it in a separate video. So let's start. Here's the map of the location that we're talking about. So you can see this is just above Crimea, right? You see where my pointer is? My cursor? It's just above Crimea. We're talking about the Kherson region, okay? And you have the river here, the Dnipro River, which I'm sure it's pronounced differently, but this river basically comes down to here, and there's a dam blocking it. It's just the Kakhovka Dam, right? And it's located in Nova Kakhovka. So this is very crucial for many reasons, right? But you can see in red, what is this? I've always told you, a map without a legend is garbage. This map does have a legend. What does it say in red? It says Russian military control. So this entire region is under Russian military control, okay? Keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that in a second. Now, here's some photos of the damage. You can see that on June 1st already, so just a few days ago, about a week ago, there was already some trouble on this area. June 2nd is becoming worse, and on June 6th, down below, you can see it's just, the whole thing, it's gone. It's just given way, and all the water is coming in, and people are being evacuated. It's very, very bad. It's very serious. Here, I'm just trying to show you the photos again in perhaps higher resolution. So that's June, on the 2nd before it breaks. And so this is not the dam. These are just photos of the flooding. So you can see how serious this is, right? And people in the region are being evacuated. Here's a video, actually. Right, so that's drone footage, and I believe it was provided by Zelensky's media office. I was joking to myself, it's nice of them to send both an underwater and aerial unmanned vehicle, right? The underwater drone, of course, being used to destroy it. But it was not an underwater drone, to my knowledge. I have a much better suspect, which I'll get to in a moment. But you get the idea of what the situation looks like. It's very bad. And again, this is from In Context, which is my media outlet. So you should definitely go follow it if you want more like this. Just take a look at what we posted earlier. So there's a whole explanation there, and you can see the flooding, right? It's very serious. So let's go through what the BBC, a staple of independent media, as you all well know, right? Let's look at what they had to say, all right? Let's go through it. So they basically give you the rundown, they give you all the details that I just did. And they say here that the dam holds water equal to the Great Salt Lake in the United States of Utah. So for those of you who know your American geography very well, that's a large amount of water, right? And even the BBC, what do they say? Russian controlled. As a matter of fact, the map I showed you earlier is from the BBC. Okay, so we all understand this is Russian controlled. Now, somehow, even though this is Russian controlled, the Ukrainian military and NATO, as you can see on the screen, have accused Russia of blowing up the dam. So Russia blew up a dam inside territory that Russia controls. That makes a lot of sense. All right, let's keep going. Oh, by the way, some swans just like casually chilling there, their reaction to the whole dam incident's like, this is nice. Anyway, the dam is a vital channel carrying water from the Dnipro to Russian-occupied Crimea, meaning that water supplies there are likely to be affected. Why did I highlight this sentence for you? The dam is important because one of the channels where does the water go through? To Crimea, okay, which is under Russian control. Now, in 2014, as the BBC note here, in 2014, after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, Ukraine blocked a channel carrying water from Nova Kakhovka, triggering a water crisis on the peninsula. When they say peninsula, we're talking about Crimea because it's on the Black Sea, it's a peninsula. So basically, in 2014, Ukraine blocked one of the channels from this dam that brings water to people living in Russian-controlled Crimea. Okay? Now, last year, they say that Russian forces reopened the channel soon after last year's full-scale invasion. Okay? So in 2022, the Russians, they opened this channel and now water could go back to Crimea. Which by the way, just, I mean, if in case this went over some of your heads, Ukraine blocking drinking water and water to people in Crimea just because, Russia is controlling it. I mean, it says a lot. But anyway. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the BBC are telling you very clearly Russia needs this dam because the flow of water has to be controlled. It must be controlled. And then one of the channels can be directed to Crimea, which Russia controls. So Russia controls the dam, Russia controls Kherson, this region, and Russia controls Crimea. And somehow the BBC can't figure out who blew up the dam. It must be Russia, right? Because NATO are saying it's Russia, so that must be true. Ukraine saying it was Russia, so that makes it true. I mean, just look at the sentence above. They say, neither Ukraine nor Russia's claims have been verified by the BBC. Well, then verify. It's no pun intended, because the BBC recently launched some crappy thing called BBC Verify, where now they check news facts and do their actual goddamn jobs. No pun intended, I said damn. But how can you be so inept? Oh, we couldn't verify it. Well, then fucking verify it. What do you have? You don't have any brain cells? You got no functioning brain? You're telling us this is vital for people in Crimea, which is controlled by Russia. The region where the dam is located is controlled by Russia. Russia controls the dam. But, we have no clue who blew it up. We just can't figure it out. That's it. That's the article. I read the article. That's it. There's nothing left. I mean, what an absolutely abysmal job. I've never seen people so inept at doing their jobs. So in any case, I don't have. I already told you what Ukraine is saying. Ukraine are saying there was Russia, and Russia saying it was Ukraine. Now let's just listen to the Kremlin's response, so their official statement on this whole incident. Okay, just for the sake of listening to it.
Здесь мы можем уже сейчас однозначно заявить, что речь идет о преднамеренной диверсии украинской стороны. Эта диверсия потенциально может повлечь очень тяжелые последствия для нескольких десятков тысяч жителей региона, экологические последствия и последствия иного характера, которые еще предстоит установить. Кроме того, однозначно, что эта диверсия ставила в качестве одной из целей лишить Крым воды.
Right. So I always tell you what both sides say. Okay, I always give you both sides of the story. I stopped him here because I want to talk about Crimea now. Okay, why is Crimea important? Because as I said, you can see on the map, there has to be a dam. If there's no dam, this is what happens. The water just goes everywhere. It's not going to even reach Crimea, right? It will flood the regions in the immediate vicinity of the dam. So the regions that are, in the surrounding areas of the actual dam, those will be flooded. And it's kind of like, you're breaking a glass and it's just spilling everywhere instead of you actually filling the glass with water and giving it to someone, right? Just to give you a sort of an analogy, right? So they're saying, the Russians are now saying that this was not just an act of terrorism. They're saying it's on purpose to strip people in Crimea of water. Now, you take that and make of that what you will. But I think if you have even one brain cell in your head, you can easily see who's doing this. And even more indicative that this was Ukraine. Let me show you something from the Washington Post. And when was this published? Just so you can, just so you know the date, all right? This was published on December 29th of 2022, okay? So it's barely been 6 months, okay? Well, not barely, it's almost 6 months. In any case, let me read this paragraph to you. So the Washington Post in December said, 2 bridges were targeted with U.S.-supplied M142 high mobility artillery rocket systems. That, in short, it's HIMARS. It's I did a lot of videos about this. That's the name of the system, the HIMARS, okay? So basically, you remember they gave the Ukrainians the capability to use only short-range rockets. They wouldn't, rather missiles. They wouldn't give them the long-range ones for fear of them striking into Russian territory and so on. But they gave them the systems, okay? So they're saying that Ukrainians use these American systems, okay, with their 50-mile range, and those bridges that they struck were rendered impassable, meaning they just blocked the way for any Russian troops. Kovalchuk considered flooding the river. The Ukrainians, he said, even conducted a test strike with a HIMARS launcher on one of the floodgates at the Nova Kakhovka Dam. That's the actual dam that has just been, mysteriously destroyed. The Ukrainians actually fired a missile at this very same dam 6 months ago. And they didn't destroy it completely, but they destroyed one gate. Okay, so it says here they made 3 holes in the metal to see if the river's water could be raised enough to stymie Russian crossing but not flood nearby villages. So the idea is that, they would make it so catastrophic that Russians could just not get through. I mean, maybe with boats and a little paddling, but certainly no mechanized infantry and so on, right? It would be flooded. So even in the mainstream media, they're admitting that Ukraine fired HIMARS American-made missiles at this dam in December. So even if you want to blame the Russians, the Ukrainians at least share a certain part of the blame for literally breaking, and trying to just test flooding the areas. I mean, this is, to call it catastrophic is kind of an understatement, right? Let me show you this also. I think Kim.com posted this. He basically, shows another smoking gun. He says a satellite service in France measures the water levels of lakes and water reservoirs like the Nova Kakhovka Dam. The data suggests that Ukraine artificially raised the water level in the reservoir to the highest level in 8 years, just before the dam was destroyed. What a coincidence. So if you look at this thing, I mean, just try to look at the date here where my cursor is. It doesn't really tell you, was this actually right before the dam was destroyed? And you can see that underneath, the end date that he had selected was indeed the 4th of June, 2023, which is, when the dam started just, coming apart. So yes, that's how you know that we're talking about this date. Okay? So, I mean, you have several smoking guns here, okay? You have several smoking guns. The Ukrainians raised the water level artificially. They fired missiles at this dam in December to test flooding the area to stymie Russian troops. This whole place, the whole region is controlled by Russia, so why the hell would they, flood their own areas? It makes absolutely no sense militarily, economically, ecologically. It's just stupid, right? And dangerous. Crimea, which is also under Russian control, which is Russian, would have no water as a result. We know that Nord Stream and the Crimea Bridge were also blown up. Those were also acts of terrorism and acts of sabotage against very, very crucial civilian infrastructure. And what happened? Immediately, they put the blame on the Russians, even when, once again, it made no sense for them to do that to themselves. So we have multiple smoking guns. I think I lost count. It was 7. That the sabotage at the Kakhovka Dam, it was not the Russians who did it. It was Ukraine or the CIA, MI6, take your pick from the NATO member states. This makes no sense for Russia to have done it. And I just want to show you, this is so pathetic. Bild, for those of you who don't know, in Germany, there's a gutter newspaper. It's kind of the equivalent of the Daily Mail. So it's the German version of the Daily Mail, and it's called Bild. And it's so funny because, like, basically, they first published this headline saying that Russen sprengen riesigen Staudamm in der Ukraine. So basically that the Russians blew up a huge dam in Ukraine, right? And then an hour later, they changed the headline, and it says riesige Staudamm in der Ukraine gesprengt. And this basically means that a big dam in Ukraine was blown up. So they removed the Russia, the word Russia or Russians, and immediately, basically walked back this let's blame the Russians. But I mean, it's just funny watching it in real time because it was I think someone posted this and they said it was within an hour that they had changed. I mean, the whole thing is breaking news anyway, right? So it just shows you. I know, like I said, people call Bild like a gutter newspaper, but the funny thing is that people need to understand all the newspapers in the West are doing exactly what I just showed you. It's just they do it at different dates. So I'm just gonna, if you're watching on replay, click on these next videos because I'm gonna do one about Nord Stream in just a second and the Nazi symbols. And it's the same thing. You got Washington Post and New York Times finally admitting that yes, Ukrainian soldiers are wearing Nazi symbols, they're Nazi patches, and also who blew up Nord Stream 2? It was Ukraine. So it's the same thing. They also changed their headlines. It's just they do it after a year. I'm so sick of this. Oh, let's blame the Russians. Screw Russia, man. I don't care if we're talking about Russia, we're talking about Mozambique, China. Let's look at the facts and the motives. Who has the motive and the capability to blow up a dam, to blow up a pipeline, to blow up a bridge? It's not the Russians. The Russians have the capability. They don't have the motive. You might believe the Russians are evil. They're not stupid. This was NATO. This was Ukraine. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. Do you guys remember this story? I showed this to you when it first appeared. I think it was a year ago. And it was about how the Americans had struck a dam in Syria, right? And bombed it and blown it up. This is the Topka Dam. Now, basically, the ordnance, the bomb that hit the dam didn't explode. It was a dud, right? When a grenade doesn't go off or something doesn't work, you call it a dud. So thank God it was, because if the dam had blown up, it would have killed so many people in Syria. I think even in the New York Times, they said that the death toll would have been more than everybody killed in the entire war in Syria since 2011. Like that's how bad this flooding would have been. In any case, my point is that we have historical precedents of the United States striking civilian infrastructure like this. And even by their own admission, this was on a no-strike list. They weren't supposed to bomb it, even by their own admission and own standards, and they bombed it nevertheless. Basically, just to cut it short, you had a rogue team of, I think being in Syria at all is rogue, but in any case, you had a team of special forces that were just basically calling in airstrikes the whole time and pretending that their life was in danger and so on. Yeah, that's how they got the Air Force to bomb it. But in any case, look at the dam in Ukraine, in the Kherson region that has just completely exploded today. It's just gone to pieces. And now you have all this flooding. Once again, who does these kinds of things? I don't recall the Russians, doing this in Syria. I don't recall, the Russians blowing up their own pipelines. You have so many acts of really, really huge acts of terrorism in this war in Ukraine that are just difficult to process. The scale of how important they are, it's difficult to process. And then when you see that, in our mainstream press, it's not even covered properly, makes it even worse because you just don't understand. This is so important. It's so big. How could you not talk about it? And nevertheless, they sweep it under the rug, whether it's the Crimea bridge attack, the Nord Stream pipeline, or the dam today. They will sweep all of these things under the rug. After they've blamed Russia, of course, and so on. And so, we have a society where there's no healthy debate, there's no critical thinking skills. there's no, there's no basic standard of journalism. Nothing. This is sick. What they're doing. And bombing civilian infrastructure like this is a war crime. In case that wasn't obvious. Perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier, but to me it's obvious. I think to most people it's obvious, and I'm sure to you guys it's obvious. Bombing a dam, that's a war crime because this is civilian infrastructure. If I recall correctly, the Israelis, they've committed their fair share of war crimes anyway, but specifically in 2006, it was around 33 days, this war in summer. And I was next door in Syria at the time, in Damascus. And Beirut is like 2 hours away, right? And so you have the Israelis, they were bombing Beirut, war crime after war crime. And I think they bombed a dam as well, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I've lost track and lost count. The list is truly that long. But you get my point, right? This is a war crime. The flooding will kill people. And just as a side note, if I may, there's a story, and this is true. During World War II, you had a group of pilots who were called the dam busters because they would blow up dams. That's what they did. And the idea was, it was 3 dams, and it was in Germany, in the industrial Ruhr, right, if I'm not mistaken. And basically the idea was that the Lancaster bombers, which were the British bombers at the time, so sort of, you could say sort of like the equivalent of an American B-17, would come in and would drop this barrel. And when you have you take a bunch of stones and you start skipping on a pond. It was the same idea, but on a larger scale. Instead of a stone, it would be a barrel full of explosives, and it would skip on the water on the surface and then hit the dam, because the Germans had put nets in the water so that if you fired a torpedo, it would never even reach the dam. And so they had all these protections. And so the idea was, well, why not just skip it over the water, right? And I think they almost put the whole thing in the bin, in the whole project. But they did do it, and they did blow up the dams. There's even a movie, I think. It's an old movie in black and white, The Dam Busters. A great theme song, right? All these World War II movies had amazing theme songs. But in any case, the sad thing actually is that even though the dams, they accomplished the mission, I think more Soviet prisoners of war were killed by the flooding than actual Germans, and basically the damage, I think, was not that significant. I mean, to warrant so many lives. It's in any case, I just thought I'd mention that because my point is that in England and in the United States, we've sort of made a habit of blowing up dams. So who's the suspect when we look at what's happening in Ukraine today? It's us. And of course, when we talk about World War II, we were fighting Nazis back then. What's happening, this example in Syria is not the same in any way whatsoever, nor is the attack on the dam in Ukraine today similar in any way or capacity whatsoever.